Hey guys, Joe here, the man who says Reservoir Dogs is Tarantino's best, and I'm here to talk about UFC Fight Night, Bobby Green versus Grant Dawson. It was a card. I really wasn't feeling it personally, so enough talk. Let's just get to the fights. So main event of the evening, lightweight fight between Grant and Dawson, who has been kind of tearing up the division as of late, honestly. Kind of coming under, looking like a dark horse. But he has to go through fan favorite Bobby Green. The fight was just over 30 seconds, though. Bobby Green landed a clean left hand very early on and just blasted Dawson, and that's the finish. Poured it on for it. That's the fight. That's the whole thing. Funnily enough, though, it seems like the commentators afterwards were kind of like, filling in the airtime after the fight was over. And they were kind of tossing around the idea of Patty fighting Bobby Green. And even DC said, no, they're not going to do that. Very true. The UFC is just going to actively refuse to give Patty anyone that has any kind of remote power. I think like Drew Dober was a fun one I had in mind at one point, then I was like, they're never going to do that. Speaking of Drew Dober, this is fun news, I think. This is really cool. So Drew Dober set the record for most lightweight KOs at 9. That's pretty prestigious. That's like one of the most prestigious divisions, lightweight. It's oftentimes heralded as the best division overall. I disagree, but overall, like throughout its whole lifespan, maybe the best. It's at least up there for me. The great eras of BJ Penn, Frankie Edgar, even Vincent Henderson, But, it's kind of interesting. 9 KOs. That's a lot. And I feel like that's a lot at lightweight. And they had to get that to break the record. So, props off to him. So, in his fight, he fought Rick Glenn. He kind of lit him up early, nearly got a finish, but there was a really egregious holding of the gloves there. But then right after, he just landed another couple bombs, and he gets another win, the TKO win. So, props to him. Super awesome. I love Drew Dober. Big Drew Dober fan. I think he's a little too respected to be a boy personally, but if he is allowed, he's in my stable. Absolutely. So, mega congrats to Drew Dober on his record break. But let's get to the rest of the card, because I wasn't, once again, I don't think this card was very good. Joe Pfeiffer, he submitted Abdul Razak Al Hassan in the second round with an arm triangle choke. Joaquin Buckley, he won at welterweight against Alex Moreno. Morano, I've also heard people say, but I feel like that sounds like Moron O, and I don't want to call him that. Bill Algeo, he got a decision win over Alexander Hernandez. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she got a decision win over Diana Belbita. I always butcher her last name too. That's always one that always just crushes me. Nate Maness got a TKO win over Matush Mendoka. Vanessa Demopoulos, she beat Kanako Murata by decision. Aodi Kiyang beat Johnny Munoz by decision. And finally, JJ Aldrich, she beat Montana De La Rosa by unanimous decision, which sadly it does halt her finishing streak that she was on. JJ Aldrich was on a solid finishing streak of 1. I have to throw that in there. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. So what else am I going to talk about today? Let's talk about the landmark event for Bellator 300. It was a pretty solid one for the most part. I had fun watching it, except for the main event, but I'll talk about that. And it was a good one for women's MMA as a whole, I think. So, main event, they put their golden boy, Usman Nurmagomedov, in the main event against Brent Primus. And it was very, very boring, I thought. It was a 5-round decision, and I was bored to tears at the end of it. I'm tired right now, if you can't tell. It's because I watched it most recently. Because I watched all the fights except that one, and then I watched that one a couple hours ago, and I'm just like, oh my god, it wasn't very good. Chris Cyborg, one of the legends of the sport, a very top contender for the best female fighter ever. So she took on UFC alum and title challenger Kat Zingano, and got a first round TKO over her at featherweight. Kat Zingano, man, I've always wanted her to get a belt, because pre-Ronda Rousey, I thought she was like super scary. And then she had a bunch of personal things going on. She had the big injury before that. It was just a really hard run to the title for her. And I feel like that halted a lot of her progress. Her fight with Amanda Nunes is incredible. What a insane barn burner of a fight. Liz Carmouche, another name that's just awesome. She had a 5th round TKO win with leg kicks over Ilima-Lei McFarland. It was a battle of friends, which always is a little hard and rough, but I thought the fight was pretty good. I thought that it wasn't awful. It was pretty solid, actually. I had a lot of fun with it. And Liz Carmouche, honestly, on one of the best runs of her career, I get it, it's Bellator, lower talent level. Yeah, sure. But, like, at the end of the day, you know, like, Liz Carmouche is pretty good. You know, she took, Valentina couldn't finish her. She had to get that jab in there. No, that fight's awful, too. Liz Carmouche, Valentina is a terrible fight. But, jokes aside, yeah, I mean, like, that's fine. If she goes to Bellator, she gets paid. She's making money. She's making good money, better money than she was making in the UFC. And she's on probably the best run of her career. I'm super happy for her. Good. Awesome. Like, you know, and it's not like they're doing like the olden days with like, I think Bjorn Rebney, maybe it was Scott Coker still, where they were doing the whole, let's have Hoist Gracie fight Frank Shamrock. Hoist Gracie's going to knee Frank Shamrock really hard in the balls. Or, you know, rest in peace, Kimbo and Frank did I say Frank Shamrock? I meant Ken Shamrock, but all this time. Ken Shamrock versus Kimbo Slice. It's very, very clearly fixed. Dada 5,000, like paying him like crazy money for these like really awful like fights. She's legitimately the champion over there. Like, she's legitimately their champion, and she's legitimately defending the title. You know, awesome. Awesome for her and Cyborg. Super pumped. And I wanted to bring this fight up as well. Leah McCourt beat Sarah McMahon, who I had no idea was over in Bellator. Another UFC vet, Sarah McMahon. One of my favorites back in the day. Like a super crazy wrestler. And when her and Ronda Rousey were fighting, that was like one of the like really like awesome ideas for a fight. It's like, oh my god, the best judoka and the best like, you know, wrestler. This is great. Then like a really early stoppage from like a knee to the liver, which was clean and hurt, but come on, that was a little early stoppage. But Sarah McMahon was awesome, super fun. Back in the day, I thought sometimes she's a little lay and pretty, but you know, really good wrestler in that women's 135. And the rest of the card was like your typical smaller name people trying to make a name for themselves. You know, the Bellator thing. They were getting their jobs done, but like I was implying earlier, this card straight up better than what the UFC put out this weekend. And I know it's a big Bellator card versus a fight night, right? Like, that's not a fair comparison. And I agree, it isn't a fair comparison. It's like comparing that piece of crap Starfield game to, hey, it's finally actually a really good game, Cyberpunk. Like, one had 3 years to fix itself. The other one's just a piece of crap now. Like, you know, it's not a fair comparison. That said, the UFC just really loves pumping out these, like, meh fight cards. Like, me and my best friend, we turned on the fights to watch them, the UFC fights, and we were like, Grant Dawson, Bobby Green's the main event, huh? After a week of not having fights, you know, kind of wanting a little something, this is the main event. That feels like the opening of, like, a main card on, like, a pay-per-view, or maybe, like, the co-main event of, like, a really top-heavy fight night. Oh man, I wanted a card that had real stakes, something really good to satiate me after like the break we had, the week break. You know, oh, you know what I did in this week break? I watched boxing. I found out about Salvador Sanchez. Wow, that is probably the best boxer I've ever seen in my life. Big Julio Cesar Chavez fan. Salvador Sanchez, though, that's probably the best Mexican boxer I've ever seen, and maybe the best boxer skill-wise I've ever seen. Wow, go look him up if you're a boxing fan. Salvador Sanchez. Died at 23. Crazy. But Bellator had it. Bellator had the card that had the stakes, and it had the titles, and it had the things going on and that mattered, and I cared about. The UFC doesn't do that on fight nights. They're really bad lately. Just a little rant. I had to have it. You know, kind of thing. Plus, I really wanted to talk about, you know, the great show. I thought it was a pretty fun show. Since I watched it, let's go. Tune in next week to where I probably do the same rant again. No, not really. I actually don't hate next week's card. It's got Jonathan Martinez versus Adrian Yanez, which I think sounds super fun. I'm a big fan of Adrian Yanez. I hope he kind of bounces back after the Rob Font loss. Super Sadiq Youssef. I'm a really big fan of Super Sadiq Youssef. He's taking on Edson Barboza. That should be pretty good, I think, hopefully. Barboza's kind of past his prime, but Super Sadiq Youssef, you kind of need that win to really help elevate you to that next level, and I'm hoping this is it for him, admittingly. But we should have some fun with that card. Excuse me. But that's it for me, though. I'm Joe with the INC. Thank you for watching.